It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. We start off with the market reaction to the UK referendum result. Britain's surprise decision to leave the European Union continues to take a toll on global markets. Here in Korea, both the benchmark Kospi and the tech-heavy Kosdaq opened down roughly 1%. All three major U.S. stock indexes dropped at least 1.5% on Monday. The Nasdaq fell over 2%, performing worse than the other indexes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1.5%, while the S&P 500 lost around 1.8%. European stock markets stumbled as well. Britain's FTSE 100 fell 2.6%, while Germany's DAX and France's CAC 40 each gave up 3%. Now, the leaders of the EU's three most populous nations say there can be no informal talks about Britain's departure from the EU until the legal process is triggered by London. The outgoing British Prime Minister says the UK needs more time, so the next move is anyone's guess ahead of a crunch EU meeting in Brussels on Tuesday. Kim Mo-kyun has the details.
The leaders of Germany, France and Italy have stated that no informal talks or deals will be made with Britain before it delivers a formal notification of withdrawal, referring to Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. The statement was delivered at a joint press conference by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, French President François Hollande, and Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi following crisis talks in Berlin. Ahead of an EU leaders' summit in Brussels Tuesday, Merkel stressed that there must be no prolonged period of uncertainty and that the EU must counter centrifugal forces in other countries pushing to leave the Union. She said the two-day summit will focus on setting a new impulse for cooperation in defense, economic growth, and competitiveness. Hollande also urged Britain to not waste time, adding that moving forward quickly will benefit all parties. Renzi said Britain's vote to exit the EU could be a great opportunity for the rest of the bloc to make long-needed changes. While those talks were happening in Berlin, British Prime Minister David Cameron told MPs that now is not the right time to invoke Article 50, adding that the timing is up to Britain alone.
Before we do that, we need to determine the kind of relationship we want with the EU. And that is rightly something for the next Prime Minister and their cabinet to decide. I've also made this point to the Presidents of the European Council and the European Commission, and I'll make this clear again at the European Council tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, this is our sovereign decision, and it will be for Britain and Britain alone to take.
Article 50 sets out how an EU country might voluntarily leave the Union. It gives negotiators a minimum of 2 years to reach an exit deal. When Britain makes it formal, it will mark the first time Article 50 has ever been invoked. Kim Mo-kyun, ARIRANG News.
Korea's consumer sentiment continues to remain sluggish as uncertainties have heightened both in and outside of the country. The Bank of Korea says the index came in at 99 this month, unchanged from May. The figure in May ended a 2-month upward streak in March and April. The monthly index reflects the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions, and future spending plans. A reading below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Within the economy, the government's push to overhaul Korea's ailing industries has dampened the outlook as thousands of people could lose their jobs in the struggling shipping and shipbuilding industries. Britain's decision, of course, to leave the European Union, coupled with a possible rate hike in the U.S., were cited as lingering uncertainties overseas. In a worrying development, the United States says North Korea might have taken a big step toward mastering the technology required to develop operational intercontinental ballistic missiles. Facing the growing threat, the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are holding a drill to track future missiles fired by the North. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The Pentagon has confirmed that the U.S. tracked the flight path of North Korea's most recent Musudan missile launch, saying it went into space before re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. The statement by the Pentagon spokesperson is the first time the U.S. has publicly confirmed the performance of a North Korean missile launch. Pyongyang had earlier claimed the missile had entered orbit and come back down, boasting that it had perfected the complex technology required to pull off such a feat. Mastering a re-entry technology is one of the keys to developing an intercontinental ballistic missile, as it needs to endure extreme heat when re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Last week's Musudan test was the regime's 6th since April. The previous 5 had ended in failure. exploding in mid-air soon after launch. With the rise in missile threats posed by North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. are scheduled to hold a trilateral missile defense exercise this week in Hawaii. The exercise will focus on sharing information and tracking the enemy's missile trajectory. All three countries have deployed Aegis destroyers for the drill. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
More bloodshed in the Middle East. Dozens of people have been killed in 2 terror attacks in Yemen and Lebanon. Attackers launched a series of suicide bombings in a major port city in Yemen on Monday, killing at least 42 people and injuring more than 30. Most of the victims were soldiers, but one child was also killed. The bombs went off when soldiers were preparing to break their day-long fast for Ramadan. The Islamic State militant group claimed responsibility for the attack on Twitter and its own news outlet. On the same day in Lebanon, at least 5 people were killed and 28 wounded when 4 suicide bombers blew themselves up in a predominantly Christian village in the northeast of the country. No group has claimed responsibility for those bombings. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at noon, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.